Okay, our boy David's going to try to play the accordion. He had only taken lessons for about 6 weeks.
No, I mean, right there. So much like
She's in the same class.
They got the bent part, don't they?
They do, yeah. That's why I confused you, because I was thinking, you know, what kind of thing out there?
Mars.
okay? I have the measles and the mumps, a gash, a rash, and purple bumps. My mouth is wet, my throat is dry. I'm going blind in my right eye. My tonsils are as big as rocks. I've counted 16 chicken pox. And there's one more, that's 17. And don't you think my face looks green? My leg is cut, my eyes are blue. It might be rheumatic flu. I cough and sneeze and gasp and choke. I'm sure that my left leg is broke. My chin hurts, my hip hurts when I move my chin. My belly button's caving in. My back is wrenched, my ankle sprained. My appendix pains each time it rains. My nose is cold, my toes are numb. I have a sliver in my thumb. My neck is stiff, my spine is weak. I hardly whisper when I speak. My tongue is filling up my mouth. I think my hair is falling out. My elbow's bent, my spine ain't straight. My temperature is 108. My brain is shrunk, I cannot hear. There's a hole inside my ear. I have a hangnail and my heart is, what? What's that? What's that you say? You say today is Saturday? Goodbye, I'm going out to play. No,
Larry? Warren said he would play his accordion.
Okay. Arlen, you ready?
Lessons for quite a few years. I never did get real good, but I have a few favorite songs I get out and play once in a while. So I just play a couple.
I was really happy to hear that Arlen knows how to play the accordion because we surely do need some music in our family. I inquired before the reunion if anybody could play the guitar so we could do some singing. And so we're going to keep on Arlen all year learning primary songs so we can have some help. And if anyone does play the guitar or anything like Noel plays the clarinet, we're going to send out a search for talent so we can do a little more on these places where we have no piano. Grandpa wanted me to tell you a little bit about Grandma Cooley. I'll call her Mother most of the time because, of course, she is my mother, and her name is Marvel. Many of you who are younger don't really know what Great Grandma Cooley's name is. It's Marvel. She has a daughter named Marvel, but sometimes we use the same name over and over again. Marvel was born in Newton, in Cass County, in Utah. How many of you can remember where Newton is? She lived there. Her father's name was John Edward Griffin, and her mother's name was Mina Mariah Son. And so you see, those of us who are named John or Edward were named after her father. And if your name is Mina, you were named after her mother. These are favorite names of ours. She had a brother named Stanley. The brother you met today named Marcus, and we called him Dr. Mark. And her sister's name was Mina. It was a small family, but it was a loving family. It was a prominent family in the Cache Valley area. Her father and her grandfather had worked in the church and in city offices throughout their life, and they were well known. And those of us who grew up in the valley were always very happy to say they were Marcus Cooley's daughter or John Griffin's granddaughter. It was quite a shock for me to move to Salt Lake and no one realized how important I was, even though I told them that I was John Griffin's granddaughter or Marcus Cooley's daughter. They didn't know our father. They certainly would know my grandfather. And if that didn't help, they would have certainly known Hank Funk because he was a real stalwart pioneer in the Cache Valley area. Her grandfather had been a bishop for over 40 years. Her father was well educated for those days. He was one of the few men in Cache Valley, particularly in Newton, who had ever gone beyond high school. He was a college graduate. Well, Grandma was a really lively young girl. We think our grandchildren are lively, and I think our grandmother was lively too. When I think of her, the picture I always think of my mother as a little girl is the one that used to hang on the wall in the bedroom. I wish I knew where it is today. She had long, dark, curly ringlets. And I guess Sherilyn, if you look at Noel's daughter Sherilyn, her pretty long, dark hair, that would be what Grandma Cooley's hair was when she was Sherilyn's age. She liked to do things out of doors. She wanted a bicycle so much that she gathered together old parts of bicycles and with the help of a handyman, hired man, made herself a bicycle. And then she remembers that she had fun on that bicycle, and she adds, I guess sometime I got a new bike, but she remembered the one she made. She liked to work out of doors more than doing housework, so she was given a permanent assignment of feeding the chickens and gathering the eggs. That was year-round, she did that. In the summertime, she was also asked to milk the cow. But she didn't like to milk the cow in the barn. She liked to milk it out of doors. If she was afraid of the other cow, she often, when she was milking the cow would move. And so she'd have to pick up her bucket and move with the cow. And once in a while, when she wasn't ready for it, and the whole bucket of milk was kicked over, and she said she got milk baths long before it was popular. Her father was quite a gardener, and those of you who can remember the home in Newton, the beautiful flowers and the wonderful gardens that we always had, the corn. She got her love of flowers and growing things from her own father, who taught her how to do that. I can remember his beautiful flower garden, even though he died when I was very young. Some of you might not know that Grandma Cooley learned to play the piano very well. She didn't have much time to play the piano after we children came to live with her, but I can particularly remember being impressed with her playing the song Nola. Remember how that has lots of notes in it and goes really fast? Well, she had memorized that, and once in a while we could get her to play the piano for it. She loved to read. As you know today, your granddaughters are always trading books with Grandma. Well, she learned to read as a little girl, and she tells us that books were so scarce that when any of her cousins in town got a new book for Christmas, or any of her friends, they always traded. So most of the time she had read every book in Newton. She had two friends who were dear to her, little girls that lived in town. One was named Eva, and one named Ellen, and they had a lot of fun. They had to create their own fun, so they played mailman. And the girls would write letters and post it in a mailbox, and one would act as the deliverer, and then they created their own fun that way. These friends were her friends until one of them has passed away, the other one's still living, and she talks to her every once in a while, Ellen Lowers. When she was about 8 or 9 years old, I wouldn't talk to the children, but when she was very young, I'm going to tell those of her 8 or 9 years old to think about this assignment she had. Her Aunt Annie lived next door to her, but Aunt Annie had no children, and Aunt Annie was hard of hearing. But Aunt Annie's husband, Uncle Mark, liked to travel, so did Aunt Annie, and they would often come to Salt Lake on the train, which was really an adventure. Most of Grandma's friends never went anywhere in their childhood. They just stayed in Newton. Maybe once in a while, maybe once a year or so, they would get the buggy to be able to go over to Logan, which wasn't very far. But Grandma, at about 8, 9, 10 years of age, would come to Salt Lake and other places with Aunt Annie to be Aunt Annie's ears.
Then it's going to be like 9 months.
Grandma would go to the meetings with Aunt Annie and sit right close to her, and when the speaker would speak as I'm speaking, she would lean up and whisper and tell Aunt Annie what was said. They went to shows, they went to musicals, but wouldn't that be hard? You'd listen to the actors on the stage, and you'd have to quickly tell and hear it again and just quickly tell. That would be quite an assignment. But she was delighted because she liked the musicals, she liked going to town, she liked shopping, and she was Aunt Annie's ear. She liked to go to the restaurants, particularly, she said, and she would always choose the most unusual thing on the menu. And they would laugh at her because sometimes when it came, it wasn't nearly so good looking as it was fascinating sounding. And she didn't always like it. Another thing that she did in her early childhood, when she was about 14 or 15, Uncle Mark purchased, Uncle Mark Griffin, this was the Aunt Annie's husband, purchased a car, one of the very first cars in that area. And he called it it was like an E-M&F. And I thought those you husbands would get a kick out of this. The E-M&F meant every mile fixin'. So they would travel around to the farming communities where he bought and sold grain and produce. But every few miles that car would break down. And he'd invite mothers and grandma to go along with him for company, he said. But often it turned out that she had to push that car while he drove. She she said she'd push it up the hill, and then it'd roll down, and she'd have to run like crazy to catch up with the car to go on another few miles. But Uncle Mart was good to Mother and taught her to drive. So she thinks easily. She was the first girl in Newton to learn to drive a car. And he was good enough to let her on Sunday afternoons take the car and go to get her friends and go to the candy kitchen for an ice cream cone. Of course, she said everybody wanted to ride with her, even the boys. And so felt she was really very popular then. And I've been grateful to Uncle Mart that he taught Mother how to drive, because she surely did drive us all over that valley. I've often thought so many times how lucky we were to have a mother who wasn't afraid to drive, who would always be ready to go when we needed to do something. Well, when she was a little girl, her grandmother was bedridden, Grandma Fun. And Grandma Cooley began her long, long life of service as a little girl, playing with dolls by Grandma Funk's bed. She and Aunt Mina would sit there and play with her dolls, and if Grandma needed something, Grandma Funk, they'd run and get it, and then they'd laugh and play. She said Grandma played right with them, and Uncle Stanley sat on the bed and drove his team of horses, and these children learned to serve their own grandmother right in their home. This same loving service she has carried throughout her lifetime. She was called upon many times to help people who had really no relationship to her, and out of the goodness of her heart she did it. She once nursed a very sick child who otherwise would have died. That was when Aunt Marvel was just a baby and they were living in Mount Pleasant. She worried about this, so she was glad to give some of her nourishment to this little sick child. She was afraid for the possibility she might do some damage to her own sweet little girl. So every time she nursed the baby, before she would come home and touch Aunt Marvel, she would completely change her clothing and bathe herself to try to avoid bringing any germs home. She found out many years later that that young boy did in fact survive and to maturity, and through his life insurance, though he lost his life in the Second World War, he was able to send insurance money home to his own mother. So that carried back, that loving service that our grandmother did carried into 2 generations of survivorship. One of the other things she did, of course, was for us children. I've got too much here, and I know it'll be too long, so I'm going to try to skip this. She talks about the time when her own father was sick with a brain tumor. He was very, very sick and bedridden. We were all living in Logan that year, so Mother was able to be there to help her mother, Grandma Griffin. Grandpa Griffin kept saying, I wish I could have a tough bath. I wish I could have a tough bath. Of course, they kept him clean, but he just didn't feel clean from the bedside bath. So Mother looked at him. He looked so frail. She said, I know I can lift him. So they prepared the tub, and Mother picked him up, and though he was just so frail and wasted from the disease, he still was a very large man. It was hard for her to do. It took great courage. She put him in the tub, and he was so grateful. It was still so good. And then she put him back in the bed, and though it was a great effort for her, she was glad that she was able to do that one bit of service for her own dear father. We talk about the time when Aunt Marvel was very, very ill as a child. When they traveled to Salt Lake, they didn't know what was the matter with Aunt Marvel, but she was a very, very sick baby and not expected to live. And they talk about their faith and the faith of Grandpa Griffin gave her a blessing where he promised that she would live. He wondered at himself why he had said that, because the doctors had told him that she was not going to survive. And I believe that those of us who've had the healing power of the priesthood administered in our behalf would know that that's the way that Aunt Marvel is here today and has brought all of these wonderful children into our lives and into the world to serve. My grandma spent many days in the hospital caring for her, and it took 2.5 years to clear that abscess, as it turned out to be. The work in our own home, my brothers and sisters will certainly remember this, but maybe you grandchildren wouldn't know how hard Grandma had to work all of the time. The work was just tremendous. The washings that we had to do, you don't have the automation that we have today. In the wintertime, we would have clothing all over the house. In the summertime, added to the house chores were the farm chores, because Grandpa, Dad, was always very busy. He was a popular teacher in school. He was always on the school activities, programs, and committees. Was working in the church and away a great deal, so it was our mother who really was there. And the boys were quite a problem to her. You notice, the boys. And they always did their chores, but not, as Dad had said, the cows have to be milked at a certain hour. But the boys didn't believe that, and it was only Grandma who just Mother who kept saying to the boys, it's time to do your chores, it's time to do your chores. So that was her responsibility, but she talks about how she and Ralph every day cleaned the chicken coop. I couldn't remember that, but she said every day they cleaned half the chicken coop. I guess Ralph would remember that. That would be a chore. We had to do that in addition to our house, the food, and children. And then I remember the eggs. We did crate the eggs and sell those for just a little bit of money so we could have some of the things that we wanted. Well, she was always willing to do everything she could do. And on the farm, oftentimes there were these emergencies. Mother always could rise to the occasion. She tells about the time on a cold Sunday afternoon when the old sow decided to have her little piglet. Uncle Ralph would run down and pick up the one and then rush her back, and they made a kind of incubator in the oven for these little piglets until Grandpa could get home and take care of them properly. So things like that, you girls, was what our grandmother had to do. With 8 children, can you imagine all the PTA meetings you would have to attend, and all the programs you sit through, and all the church programs? And I don't remember that Mother was always right there when we were giving something on the program. So I'm grateful to her that she set the stage. She certainly showed us how a mother should function, the love and the kindness they should give us. I can remember that it was without a thought, every time there was a party in my class, I would say, well, my mother will bring the ice cream. She'll make a freezer of ice cream. Or you can have the party at our house. We were just very quick to volunteer our mother to do all these things for us. And she did, without any question. I suppose, really didn't want to, but I never did know that. Well, I had children of my own. How inconvenient that must have been for her to do it for 8 of us. And canning, I don't know if any of you have ever seen a canning in the Cooley household, but it was a factory production. We would go through 16 bushels of peaches in 2 days, or bushels of corn, cans of corn. I didn't mind the fruit. I kind of enjoyed it after we got started because it was kind of fun for the whole family to be in there doing something. And the corn I hated. There were always so many flies around with the corn, and we did that outdoors, you see, much of the time when I helped. But with my friends today, when I tell them how much my mother canned when I was home and knew about the cancer, they kind of snicker. They really don't believe me that any family would ever need to can that much fruit or those many cans of vegetables. That was typical of our home. Whatever we did in a big way. My mother usually didn't complain about inconvenience. Now that I think back on it, I would have not been nearly so pleasant with some of the situation she had to endure. But one time she did get very discouraged. She wanted to back lawn. You can recall, and those of us in the family, you children will see, the grandchildren will know.
Dad, she's trying to tell you something.
Dad, hard that were just pulled out, uprooted. So we had big holes and limbs and piles of dirt and lots of weeds. And Noel was a baby, probably 2 or 3 years old, and was out in that dirt constantly. And she had just about had it. She could change him 3 or 4 times a day, and he was dirty all the time. So she decided she was going to level that off and plant lawn. Now today, you might just have left the hills and planted the lawn anyway, but in those days, everything had to be flat. And Dad was always going to do it later. So Mother decided she would do it herself. And she had Bob, who was probably about 10, 12 years old, to help her. And so the 2 of them would go out with the shovel and a wheelbarrow and wheelbarrow and shovelful, try to move that soil. And they worked long hours. When John would get home from school, she'd get him to come out. She said in 15 minutes he could do more than she and Bob had done for the whole day. Well, finally they got that leveled down enough that Dad was embarrassed enough that he got the boys, Ralph and John, and they leveled it off and planted the lawn. So she did get her dander up every once in a while and persevere. She talks about their romance. You might be interested in knowing that really how it all came about. Of course, they'd always known one another because they both lived in Newton and it wasn't that large. But one year, Dad came out to work for Grandpa Griffin. And they always had the noon meal. The young men who worked on the farm for other people would stay and have a noon meal. And after the meal, they would sit on the lawn and chat and talk. And Grandma said she was really smitten. But she knew that Marcus is what she called him, of course, didn't pay any attention to her because she was younger than he. And so she wasn't aware that he had any interest in her until after although they had dated, he'd occasionally walk her home from church or after MIA. But after they'd been to Logan to school for a year, she went to tend a baby for Aunt Lucy, her aunt, in Bancroft, Idaho. And she said, a red-headed swordsman. I don't know if it's some of Lavar's ancestors, but a fellow asked her to go to a dance. So she went with him. As she arrived at the dance, the fellow who was another boy, who was a friend of Dad's, saw her there, and he asked her what she was doing there, and then he announced to everybody that this was Cooley's girl. And so he took it upon himself to protect Dad's interest, Cooley's interest. And so he made sure that Mother danced with everybody but her date. The whole night. She had a great time, but of course, Sorensen never asked her again, and shortly after that, she realized that it was the going thing, and that was her romance that began this great family. Now, Grandma likes to travel, as you're all aware. If you don't want her to go, don't ask her, because she'll go with you, but she's traveled all over the United States, most of the time to help out with babies. But there was one trip that she really didn't like. The only trip in which she was telling me about her life that she mentioned that was really a trip to the end of the world was the trip to Mount Pleasant when Ralph was a little boy and Marvel was a baby. That was the bumpiest, dustiest, dirtiest road she'd ever traveled, and it went on and on. It turned out to be such a happy year. That was the first year that Grandpa taught school. They had friends, they made such good friends in that area that they still correspond with those who survived. Still living. But she traveled a lot of it to bring you children into the world. When anyone needed her help, she was ready to go. Grandpa was good to let her go. And I don't think there's a child here in the family who wasn't cared for for by Grandma at one time, or that probably most of you, if you could raise your hand, I believe, that she had to shield your baby or tend your baby for an hour or two while you ran somewhere to do something. She's had a long, long time to care for children and has always been happy to do it. She likes to travel, and probably one of the happiest trips she ever took was when Noel and Molly took Grandma and Grandpa to Hawaii. We'll talk about it. Had such a good time. She likes to travel today. She enjoys visiting in your home. She enjoys having you come to visit with them. You might be interested in knowing that after the children were grown, pretty much, she did have a life of her own. She didn't do too much in the church when we all lived at home. I don't know whether she would have had time to. But after, she was called to be on the Relief Society, the State Relief Society Board, and I believe in the presidency at one time, too, the state, where she traveled around and gave speeches and instructions throughout the Smithfield State. She was a good speaker always. I was always proud when Mother gave a speech. She didn't do it very often. She's a little shy by nature. We're told that's the Griffin is shy. But she is an excellent speaker. She's a good thinker. She was a good student. Had a memory when I was growing up. She could tell me some of the poems she had learned as a child.
Happy in any other position.
She gave book reviews. Going to the literary club, and that's a good book review.
He does, and that's pretty exciting.
She didn't know how to sew, we thought, when we were growing up. But we had some grandmothers who she didn't have really a need and no time or no. But after we were grown, she began to learn to sew. She found out she was a good seamstress. Could have been as good as her mother if she'd started as early. She knit. She learned to knit, she said, during the First World War. And I think each one of you probably have had at least one Afghan for your baby and for yourself, and maybe more than one. She's done a lot of quilting in her life. She's a good quilter. She's active today in the Daughters of the Utah Pioneer Camp in Salt Lake. She came to Salt Lake, become acquainted in the ward. The Relief Society sisters really enjoy her. She's always fun to be with. She goes to the musicals with me and enjoys them. And she goes water skiing. And when I tell my friends that my mother will go water skiing with us every time we ask her, and I never dared ask her if she'd like to water ski because I think she might try it. I'm really proud of Mother. I've enjoyed her. I enjoy when people tell me I sound like her. I went to a class reunion not long ago, and some of the girls from Duke turned around and said, "You sound just like your mother when you laugh." And I've always been pleased for that little bit of association. I really enjoy having Mother and Dad living in Salt Lake. I'm just so proud of Grandma. And I hope each one of you will give your grandpa a great big hug and a happy birthday, and your grandmother a laugh too. You're really special. You're fortunate to have such good ancestors. We regretted that Grandpa hadn't felt good enough to come up to our house to see us lately, and we missed that association with her. But we are glad that Grandpa would let Grandma go with us so that she could go to Arizona and different places. He always wanted her to go places and see things, and she always enjoyed going there and being with any of them. And Grandpa was equally as important in the town grandma was, even though I don't have a lot written down, but I'd like to tell you that he served on he was probably one of the prime instigators in getting the new reservoir put in up to help farmers to have more water so that their land then became irrigated land instead of dry farms. He was a prime instigator in helping to get a wheat storage unit, a grain elevator attached to those farmers could store their grain and not have to sell it immediately at whatever price they could get for it. He was the mayor of the town of Newton for several years. In high school, he was always served as a student body advisor for many, many years, and he liked to travel with all of the basketball teams and the football teams, and he probably drove his car to more football and basketball players to games than anybody else. He was also a principal at Smithfield Junior High, and I can never remember the time that my dad came to church with us that somebody there didn't walk up and say, "Oh, Mr. Cooley, I haven't seen you for years." He was my teacher in high school. And everybody always said what a good math teacher he was.
You know those have you seen those?
So we're proud of both of them. They both went very good and did very nice.
About 20 inches or 30 inches of
Drive
pipe.
after
You
them
slide
all
them
out.
and hose them.
Dad, in order to take care of the family, got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go out and farm until at 8 o'clock, and then or 7:30, come in and jump into his car, drive to school, teach school all day, come back and go out on the farm, work until 10 or 11 at night, back up again the next morning at 5. This is the life that I remember that he lived all the time that I was there as a young child. Both he and mother, nobody stayed in bed after 6 o'clock. Everybody had to get up and start. And if you didn't get up, he could come up and help you get up. And everybody knew they had a job, a certain job to be done, and he expected you to do it. So he also gave us a lot of love and support, and I can never remember a time after we got married when they did a house. A, B, and something else that they drove on the farm together. And he grew all of our corn for years and years and years, and our potatoes, and for many, many years he grew a big tree in one of us so that we could have big trees there. So most all of you grandchildren owe a great deal to your grandparents and the things they did to help us out when we were first starting out. And I'd like to say thank you, and we have David say, David.
Mine's sleeping at Grandma Benton's, so I didn't have to hold him.
Okay, let's sing happy birthday. Good to see you. Griffin, you come out later.
That's good.
Okay, sing happy birthday cake also. Like that. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Grandpa. Happy birthday to you. Blah, blah. Blah, blah. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Grandpa. Happy
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful that we can be gathered together this afternoon to honor our grandparents and parents. We thank you. We're thankful that we can all arrive here in safety and renew old acquaintances. We We ask you to take us to our various homes in safety, and that we might always remember and cherish your loved ones. We say this in the name of the Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.